There we are. Welcome to today's Creative Leadership in Action with Nia and the team, Leading for Complex Times. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Lucy. And yeah, welcome everybody. As Lucy said, I'm Nia Richards. I'm the Director of Creativity, Culture and Education, and I'm here with my colleague Dee. Dee's giving us away. And we are doing this in partnership with Sarah from Penryn College.
Hi everyone, nice to see you virtually.
And this is one in a series that we've been doing since September with CAPH. So don't worry if you haven't been to one of these sessions before, because it has been different people and it's been lovely, and so we're treating them as kind of standalone sessions. So anything that we talk about today we'll explain as we go. It would be lovely to hear from Joanne, if you could just tell us something else about yourself so that we can get to know you, what your role is or whatever else you want to tell us. Go ahead.
Yes, so I'm Jo. I'm CEO of Andaris Trust in Cornwall, a primary school trust of 11 schools down in Launceston.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. Thanks for joining us today. And I can see that Katie Bray has joined us too. Katie, we're just doing quick instructions, just saying that thank you for joining us. This is a series of sessions, but don't worry if you haven't been before, because we'll explain everything. But yeah, please say hello, where you're at, what your role is.
Yeah, my name's Katie Bray. I'm at Key School just outside of Truro. I'm Senko. I also do wellbeing lead, and I'm a deputy DSL.
Thanks. Nice to meet you, Katie. James is driving, so we won't ask him to introduce himself, but maybe when he joins us in a little while. I think Sarah Reed has joined us. If you can put your camera on, Sarah, it would be great to see you. You might be, there you go. Sarah, you've been before. I recognise you, even though you're tiny on my screen. You came to the session, didn't you? And you came to the Eden conference.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's
lovely.
Great. So I'm really chuffed because I'm a little bit. I hadn't realised this was happening quite today. So this is great that that I could join. So thank you.
Be thrown in. Some other people may not know you though. So if you just wanted to quickly say who you are again, what school you're at.
So at Codes Green. I'm a head and Senko at Codes Green Primary School, which is between Callington and Launceston.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, tell me if I've missed anybody, but I think that's everybody who's on the call tonight. So, as I say, we are a charity, Creativity, Culture and Education. We work globally to transform education through creativity. But one of our big kind of missions at the moment is focusing on leadership. Because essentially our end goal is to develop children and young people who are creative thinkers and confident thinkers, and who can move into a world, a very complex world, with confidence. But actually, you know, we've kind of moved upstream a little bit, because we know we can't get to that goal unless we actually work with leaders and develop their confidence first, and their own valuing their own creativity, applying it, modeling it. So we've had, in terms of the kind of different focuses we've had in each of these sessions, we started in September looking at the purpose of school and thinking about kind of, again, as a leader, really thinking about different perspectives about actually what is the purpose of school, where does creativity fit in, and actually really thinking about creativity is foundational in terms of the kind of goals and priorities that you have as leaders. We moved on to then in the CAPH conference, the Eden project. We did, I'll just share some of these pictures with you, because if you were not there, they might look kind of quite intimidating. I don't know what the word would be, because if you can see here, hang on a sec, there we go. There. So you know, I'll explain why they're wearing glasses in a moment. It was this idea of what is creativity and what is creativity as a leader, and we'd got to thinking about, really it's about thinking, seeing, doing differently. So it was really thinking about this and applying it in terms of really kind of systemic issues, and how we can think about those differently. and through kind of collaboration and collective dialogue too. And then in the last online session, we were making our creativity visible as leaders, because if we don't make our creativity visible as leaders, how can we create the kind of psychological space that allows other people, other colleagues, to be able to take risks, to really develop and explore their ideas, and so on and so forth. Okay, so today's session, we're going to look even further at our leadership in terms of creativity, really trying to surface our default leadership instincts, and particularly under pressure. We're going to explore even further about how we think as leaders, reframing creativity as perspective, as I said earlier, sense-making, judgment, not necessarily ideation. So sometimes when we're saying creative leadership, people think it's about just having these brilliant ideas. It's more than that. So we're going to just explain and explore that a bit more. But just to explain, before I move off this slide, the partnership between us at Creativity, Culture and Education with Sarah and with CAPH. So this has come about over the last year. I've known Sarah for a while through Creativity Collaboratives, which is a big national pilot. It's been happening across England. But we connected with CAPH last year through a roundtable we did in Plymouth, exploring leading for creative thinking and what that means. And also then that's kind of snowballed to these sessions and the conference too. Okay, so if you have missed any of the previous sessions, Dee, I think if you can put the Padlet link in the chat. Some of the activities that we've done in the previous sessions, Purpose of School, and the last one in making our creativity visible. Those activities are on the Padlet. So should you want to look at those activities to see what you've missed, or to put your creative leadership hat on and to actually do those activities with colleagues, all the information is there for you to take away with you, and it'll be the same today at the end of today's session too. You can do any of these activities with colleagues. Okay, so moving on, and I'm going to ask people to come off mute and for us to have a conversation here. It's a small group, and it's one of the benefits of us being a small group, that we can just be collaborative, we can enter into a learning dialogue together. So I'm just going to give you a moment. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to ask you just to read that quote that you can see on the screen. Okay, and I'm just going to ask you, how does this quote resonate with your experience in Cornwall, and in what way? And the irony here, of course, is that it was written in 2016, and we can say that now in 2026, we're living in even more complex times. But how does this resonate with you personally? How does it resonate with your experience in Cornwall particularly? Anybody come off mute? Yeah, thank you, Joanne.
I think it's totally relevant currently. When it talks about less autonomy, we've obviously got the white paper coming. There's going to be lots of changes in that for trusts, more scrutiny. Again, I mean, from my level, I know we've now got having trust inspections on top of the Ofsted inspection. So again, more and more scrutiny coming in, and that may put more pressure on schools, because I'm assuming they'll then go out and revisit schools and things as part of that. And certainly, yeah, the rest of it, the increasing needs, the way less resources, it's completely relevant still. More so, in fact, I would say.
Thank you, Joanne.
I was just going to add that even though all of the statements are really true in certain aspects, one of the things that I find increasingly frustrating is that with regards to external agencies, there's always an advert for this agency and this agency, or this charity and that charity. So on the face of it, they're not wrong to say that there's more available for us to work with. I'm a school that isn't in a trust, so I can imagine it's a very different experience for those of you that are in a trust. But the difficulty is that they're all there at face value, but actually waiting for their assistance is so long-winded, and you can be years on the waiting list. And so I find it really hard how your autonomy is stunted because the things that you plan for to be available aren't then accessible.
Thanks, Katie.
That's true. I think also that in Cornwall, I'm speaking to friends and so on who live in other parts of the country, that we have, I'm not saying we have nothing, 'cause we have great, you know, we have amazing environment and so on, but we have so much less than other areas have got. There's so much less available. It's so much harder for children and families to access, like the other lady was saying, services, but also even, you know, aspirational things like different types of experiences, different places to visit and so on. We do have a lot. I'm not saying we don't. We have the beaches and it's great, but you know, it's limiting for families, and we have to try and meet that need, which is again difficult, as Jo was saying, without the finance to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And Kate, I didn't realize, I forgot earlier, not everybody is going to know you on this call, so sorry about that, but I don't know if you just want to come in and just say hello to everybody, but also if you've got any thoughts to add.
Yeah, hi. I just introduced myself in the chat, so I'm
Thank you, Kate.
a CAPH equivalent in CAPH, which is the secondary heads group. So I'm called a consultant executive officer, but that sounds posh. I'm just a lackey, really. So yes, I mean, the thing, I've worked in cities before I came to Cornwall. I used to be head teacher at Saltash, and I think it's the most challenging place that I've worked. I've worked in inner city London, Reading, you know, some really tricky communities with real issues. But Cornwall was definitely the most difficult because I think of the geographical isolation that you're all kind of alluding to. So there are lots of things, but they're so far away and they're so far apart that it's really, and there's not enough to meet the need. And it felt to me, you know, I was in the east of the county, that everything was down in the west of the county, and so that was really difficult to access as well. So yeah, I think the geographical setup of Cornwall does make it particularly difficult.
Thank you, Kate. That's really interesting to know, particularly before I come down in a week or two to be talking to over 70 people, I think, about some of these issues. Okay, just checking. Anybody else want to just come in with anything?
I think it's just really sad that it was in 2016 and we're still in the same place.
Yeah, I know.
It's a decade. Yeah. It's a decade on.
It's a decade.
And, you know, it's still hard. And
absolutely. And is this now, you know, the new normal? We were using that phrase in the pandemic, but is this, you know, how we're having, you know, all sorts of questions here that I'm going to come back to in a second. James, I can see that you're on the screen. Lovely to see you. If you just want to say hello to everybody, where you're at, what your school is, what your role is, and yeah, we'll come back to you.
Hi, I'm James Taylor. I'm the Trust Inclusion Lead for Crofty Education Trust. We are 18 primary schools across West Cornwall. Thank
you, James. I hope you've been able to hear this okay.
Yeah, I have. I had it on in the car, so that was fantastic.
Right.
Thank you. I think there's a certain, and I agree with the statement, and I agree with everything that everybody has said. And it's as applicable now, isn't it? Almost 10 years on than it was then. But there's a certain irony, I think, in the fact that the OECD have written that, because they obviously are the ones who create the PISA tests, and the government are absolutely obsessed with how England performs in the PISA tests. And when we didn't perform very well, around about the 2010 mark, you know, Michael Gove was like, we're never going to experience this embarrassment again, and drove standards and drove the curriculum, and it's trying to, you know, round that square with the fact that we've got this real drive for inclusion at the moment, that the government are never going to lower standards. So we've got this drive for ongoing standards, and it's just, we find ourselves in between these two really tough challenges of our time in education.
Absolutely. And goodness me, isn't like school leadership just the most difficult job in these kind of circumstances? I was talking to somebody yesterday and we were saying, you know, I can't remember what it was. There was something before Christmas, another societal issue. And the answer was, well, schools need to ... And it just seems that we're going into more of a complex place globally, societally, environmentally, economically, and always the answer is, well, schools should ... It's impossible. Just if you do have a piece of paper, it can be a scrap piece of paper, a pen or pencil, just grab something just to make some quick notes with, because I'm about to read out for you just some provocations for you just to think about, building on some of the things that you've just said. So just write some notes as I'm talking, anything that comes to mind. I'm not going to ask you to share what you write just yet. We'll come back to it later. But first of all, so what wicked problem are you grappling with them at the moment? So if you haven't heard the phrase wicked problem before, it's a problem with no obvious solution. Or if there is a solution, it's just going to create another problem. So what wicked problem are you grappling with at the moment? The next provocations are just building on that, okay? So I'm not asking you to do 3 separate things. So it's either a wicked problem or what decision are you currently sitting with where every option has a downside? Or think about it like this way. What issue has a clear procedural response but feels uncomfortable or incomplete? Okay, it just doesn't sit right with you. So I'll just go through them again. The 3 things, it's asking the same question, but I'm just asking them in a different way. What wicked problem are you grappling with at the moment? So this is a problem with no obvious solution, or if there is a solution, it's just likely to create another problem. What decision are you currently sitting with where every option has a downside? Or what issue has a clear procedural response? There's a right response, apparently, but it just feels uncomfortable, incomplete, gives you a knot in the stomach, just makes you feel a bit angsty. Okay, so this could be something small or it could be something big, but as long as you've just got something on the paper or just in your mind, so when we go on to this next bit, you've got it at the front of your thinking. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next bit if everyone's got something in mind. Okay, so I'm going to ask you now next, thinking about that issue, that wicked problem, that decision, I'm just going to ask you to sit in 3 different chairs, okay? And I'll take you through these chairs one at a time. So chair A, thinking about your issue, your decision, or your problem. What would you do if your main aim was to avoid risk, scrutiny, or challenge? What would you do if your main aim was to avoid risk, scrutiny, or challenge? Following on from that, I'm just going to give you another one. If you've managed to think about what might you be avoiding in terms of risk, scrutiny, or challenge, what are you prioritizing here? So we're still on chair A. Who or what are you prioritizing here? If your main aim was to avoid risk, scrutiny, or challenge. So some of these questions may not have an obvious answer. I would say don't overthink them, just jot some kind of thoughts that come into your mind down. If nothing comes into your mind, don't worry about it. If there are gaps in here, it's not a problem. Okay, we're going to go on to chair B. So this time with chair B, I want you to think about again the problem, the solution, or the issue. Sorry, the problem, the decision, or the issue that you had in mind. And I want you to think about what would you do if you believed you had to fix this alone. So what would you do if you believed you had to fix this alone? And then the next prompt is, what pressure are you putting on yourself? So after you've thought about how you would fix this alone, what pressure are you putting on yourself? And then we're going to move on to Chair C. And there's 4 prompts here, so I'm just going to go through them quite kind of a pacey order. So, Chair C, what would you do if you didn't rush to a resolution? So what would you do if you didn't rush to a resolution on this wicked problem or decision or issue? What questions would you ask before acting? What assumptions would you name out loud? Again, some of these may not be applicable, so just ignore if they are. What assumptions would you name out loud? And then final one, again, Chair C. What might you do with others, not to them or for them, but what might you do with others, not to them or for them? Okay, and so I'm not going to ask you to feedback your notes. All I'm going to ask you to do now, just come off mute when you feel you want to respond, is to ask you what chair out of A, B or C felt most familiar. Which one felt uncomfortable, and or which one felt most honest? So which chair felt most familiar, which one felt uncomfortable, and which one felt more honest? You might want to respond to one of those or all 3.
I think B felt most uncomfortable fixing alone.
Thanks, Joanne. And why did it feel uncomfortable?
I think because it was all, the pressure was all on you. You weren't listening to other people's opinions, sort of sharing ideas. You weren't having support from maybe governors or colleagues.
Thank you, Joanne. Anybody else with some thoughts?
I found A the most comfortable, even though actually it was the one that made it most difficult for me to find a solution. So I'm generally quite risk averse. So I sort of felt that was my default position. But actually, when I thought about C is the way I thought I could probably get the best resolution.
Thanks, Kate. Any final thoughts? Go on.
I sort of thought A was kind of the most honest, because I think with anything, you know, there's going to be some things, everyone's not going to like it, and you have to be, and I think that for me, I probably have to be really aware of the fact that there are risks, there are going to be challenges, and face that kind of head on, so that I know what I'm going into, kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you.
I felt that B was most uncomfortable, and I don't know if I'm allowed to stay the same chair for 2 of them, but my C felt most honest and most familiar.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Okay, let's move on then and see. Okay, so I mean, these labels are very kind of generalized, but you know, if we're trying to think about what sets a creative leader apart, I mean, then C would be the nearest to how a creative leader might approach kind of finding solutions, trying to find the gaps in the hedges. So a creative leader would ask, if they were faced with these kind of wicked problems and decisions, they'd ask, could I stand by this decision if I'm challenged, logically, ethically, and emotionally? They might ask whose voices or perspective are missing, and what might they see that I don't? And what would responsible courage look like to me? Not the safest option and not the heroic one. And how can I make this risk explicit and manageable for myself and for others? But it would be good to get some thoughts there in terms of, I know some of you are dropping in for the first time today, and so we're suddenly talking about creative leadership. So this might be kind of a new way of talking about leadership. But yeah, again, any kind of responses or thoughts here about, does this make sense in terms of what a creative leader might do differently?
I sort of think it's a bit of a time constraint thing as well, because I think when you went through the prompts, I thought, yeah, that ideally that I would do that, but I'd probably try and push through that quickly because I'd be trying to get to getting on with it and doing it. So I thought, yeah, it's interesting that perspective on it.
And that is a really good response, Sarah, because I've been thinking about that this week since there was a post on LinkedIn at the weekend about this research about creativity, creative thinking, but it didn't actually have any definition of what creative thinking was. It seemed to be suggesting that creative thinking is either thinking fast or thinking slow. And actually, you need a bit of both. And sometimes you do, as a leader, particularly, have to be making decisions in the moment. You have to be using your intuition. So for those of you who are not familiar with our language around creativity, we have this framework. Again, I'm pretty sure it's on the Padlet. But this is our language that we would use for what creativity is, what creative leadership are. Creative leaders embody these habits. It's language that helps us, and it's supportive when we're talking about this in education, because it then it busts the myths and assumptions around creativity being about arts. And actually this language gives us a new vocabulary for it. And what you can see under imaginative is using intuition. And I think sometimes, like Sarah, you're in the moment and you have to go with a procedural response, or you have to go with an intuitive response. So like I say, this isn't kind of clear cut, but it gives us something to discuss and to explore together about what creative leadership means. Anybody else got any thoughts about this?
Yeah, when we were looking at the when you were asking the questions, I was certainly thinking, oh well, C is where I would love to think I would be operating, and even before you put the labels on, and that seems like, doesn't that seem like the kind of best place to be? But exactly as Sarah was just saying, sometimes it's those time constraints, and there's loads of times when I would love to not rush to a resolution, and be doing things with others and not for them, but actually when you're under the cosh a bit in the fast-paced world of education, you do need to act. You do need to act quite quickly sometimes. So I agree. It's a balance, isn't it?
It's like a wicked problem in itself, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In that, there's the ideal, and then there's the day-to-day actually of what you experience as leaders and what you're faced with. I'm going to bring Sarah in here because if you don't know about her work, the brilliant work she's been doing at Penryn Collaborative, she's had to put often herself in this position where, it's grappling with tensions, it's grappling with, well, this is the ideal and this is how I'd like things to be. But actually, Sarah, over to you. Stop
hi,
sharing so we
everyone.
can see you properly.
If we haven't met before, I'm Sarah Childs. I'm assistant head over here at Penryn College, but actually for the last 5 years, which is now frankly scary, 5 years, we've been one of the Arts Council's national pilot for creativity captives, but particularly for the Penryn partnership, we've been looking across our 8 primary schools and obviously us here as a secondary school in our partnership about teaching for creativity across the curriculum. I was just smiling and thinking about being a creative leader, and it is quite reflective about the journey we've been on. I use the term pace and scale a lot in my leadership. It's all about the pace and the scale, and back 5 years ago, that was absolutely where I started, because I work in networks of school that, you know, we're not connected in a mat, you know, we're not that network, we are just an old school fashioned partnership that have a commitment and work really close to each other, and we're really so fortunate for that. But actually every school has its own pressures, and we have mats in our 4 different mats in our partnership, so every school's working within different settings all the time. And actually for me, in that leadership, pace and scale became this saying that I now reflect on so differently, because when I was working so collaboratively, I had to listen so deeply to try and understand where everybody was at in all my different settings, and I often feel sometimes that's not at the pace that I might want it to be, but actually, as Kate said, where you get to at the end point is actually more where you want to be, and schools are frenetic things, and I think probably through this journey for us, it was all about how we listen really deeply, how we therefore can reflect together more, how we act more collaboratively, and sometimes that's going to have to shift and flex and change. And I think it was interesting to listen then and thinking about being a creative leader and how that's worked for me. I guess sometimes that's something we do really visibly. I guess that's something I'm quite overt about, and then sometimes I'm just sliding back into the background and just going, oh, it's not the moment. And sometimes in leadership we don't feel that's not the thing we can do, but sometimes we just have to take that breath, and I definitely feel I've done that in the last 5 years on our collaborative journey for sure. Does that kind of give some context, Nia? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how do you feel in terms of, because again, I talked about earlier, you know, our goal at Creativity, Culture and Education is to have children who are being creative, thinking creative, leaving school ready for world of work, being creative. And I suppose, you know, how, again, you feel your leadership is supporting them, I suppose, in terms of that creativity and using, you know, being seen as a creative leader, I suppose, and modeling the creativity for both colleagues, staff and children. Again, there's probably good days and there's probably less good days.
Absolutely. And we don't actually talk about creativity explicitly here, which I think is really interesting, and that's been something I've really reflected over in the last 2 years about, do we need to be? But for us, and because of the work we did and we designed our work with industry partners, for us it's about that future proofing and children being able to be adaptable and be able to think in different ways, and it came from actually local industry partners coming to us 6-7 years ago, actually saying students are going to have to be more adaptable than they've ever been, and moving forward, who knows what they'll need to do with the knowledge that we're now giving them. Actually, they just need to be ready. And so for us here at Penryn, and I know across the partnership, we've taken that into our own context, which I think is really important, and therefore the creativity we're asking for from the children can often be around collaboration and working with others. That could be also about how they are perhaps more persistent, or we talk about ownership and action and empowerment, you know, how young people are able to foster that and feel how that develops over their journey, and how we help nurture that for me here for 7 up to 11, but as a partnership, how we nurture that from EYFS all the way through to year 11 that's the work we've been looking at. And I did an assembly with year 11 yesterday, my good example, and lots of them nervously disappearing at the moment to do their post-16 interviews at college, and I said, go talk about the knowledge, but also go talk about that beautiful skill that we've been celebrating with you. Talk about the things that you can do, whether you're asking questions or actually you're able to consider something or solve a problem in a different way. And I think that's where we've gone with our creativity journey, and that whilst doing that with leaders, and you have to do it with the leaders and children simultaneously, because half our problem 5 years ago was, as teachers, actually we didn't really understand some of the things we were talking about because it felt really new. And actually in reality for us it's just about really inspiring teaching and learning, and just embedding that, so it's almost invisible in the most beautiful way within our curriculums. And that's where we are now, really. I think that's going to keep going though. Probably need another 5 years to crack that one.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, it's interesting what you say, because we've already noted today that there was that quote at the beginning about complexity that schools are having to work in. 2016, we're now 10 years later, which is even more complex. And what kind of world are young people therefore going to be going into, and how we support them to be in a place where they can be creative leaders in complex times themselves. So that's the big question here. And I wonder whether well, just before I do, just want to just check in with everybody. If anybody wants to ask Sarah anything, I'll come back on anything that Sarah's just said.
Hello. I'm sure you haven't got this to hand, so please don't feel pressured, but I'd be really interested at some point in the future if you could reflect on whether you notice any difference in your NEET figures, the children that leave, you know, say 7 years ago before the process started, and then more recently. I just think it'd be really fascinating to see if the kind of the creative approach has helped them with their next steps, because you're an 11 to 16 college. I just think that would be amazing. If it did, can you imagine how brilliant that would be?
Yeah, it would be amazing. It's funny, I often joke. I said, actually, something Tanya Offerton Hope said to me once. She went, this would have been brilliant as a longitudinal study over 10 years. And I was like, yes, it would have been. The NEET bit's interesting. Yeah, actually, we could do. That'd be a great conversation another day, Kate. What we are managing to do now, 5 years down the road, is I know the children who were year 3, year 4, back at the beginning of the work, those young people are now here with me, who I see day to day. So actually what we are able to do in terms of change over time is I've kept students doing student voice with me now, who also are doing student voice within my primary schools back in year 3 and 4. And that's really fascinating. So from that point, we can definitely look at progress from Key Stage 2, definitely into Key Stage 3. The next bit for us is holding on almost to contact through our alumni with children when they leave us, and we have got some thoughts around that, Kate. So yeah, that'd be great another time.
Thanks, Sarah. I just wonder now, just in the last bit that we've got together, whether we could look at a wicked problem or a decision or an issue collectively. And I don't know whether somebody wants to share one that they've got, or Sarah, you might have one up your sleeve that we could look at collectively. But just checking in with everybody, if someone has got something that they're really eager for us to look at together. I'm going to come to you then. Oh, Kate.
I was just going to say, by all means, just cast this aside. I don't mind at all. But this is something that's come to me from quite a lot of the secondary heads at the moment, and that's grappling with the kind of pull between wanting to do the right thing for your neurodivergent learners and the need for kind of the systems and procedures that are imposed upon you, perhaps rephrase that in your heads, via trust.
Yeah.
And kind of that push-pull trauma of, you can either do what you believe is the right thing by the children and their families, or you can do the right thing by what your boss is telling you to do. That's lots of my heads are really grappling with that at the moment. By all means, if that's not appropriate to everybody, please do something else, but I just thought I'd mention it.
No, thanks, Kate. Well, it's interesting. Let's have a go. This is going to be a complete experiment because we haven't actually done this activity before. So let's keep that in our heads. Brought back up on the screen, you can see the creative habits. But I'm just going to go on to the next screen. Hang on, there we go. So, hang on.
That's not behaving how you wanted it to, is it?
No, this is a Canva thing again, Sarah.
We were saying before, I'm having a Canva day, Canva issue day.
Not to worry, because I printed it out, so I can just read it for you. I'm going to leave that on the screen. So this is where I'm going to just share with you something, a way that you could use this language, this framing, for something like a decision or an issue like Kate has given us now. So feel free if you want to, as I'm reading these out, if you've got any thoughts, or we can just wait until the end. So say now, if we're looking at the imaginative here, so a question that we could pull out from here, looking at this idea of, you know, the doing the right thing, even though you've got a system, perhaps it's not allowing you to do that right thing. Imaginative. So you might think, well, what's your intuition communicating, and what might it be reacting to? Well, already we get the sense from Kate's issue that it is intuition. Those values at intuition are at odds to what the system or the organization is expecting. So intuition is quite clear. So we know what intuition is telling us. But we might move to inquisitive, and the question here might be something around assumptions, challenging assumptions. So what assumptions are we making here? So thinking out loud here, you know, an assumption might be, is this what my boss, what the mat actually is expecting? Have I had that conversation with them one-to-one? What other assumptions might be being made in this situation? Another one for inquisitive, because it's around wondering and question, is, well, what's the real question beneath the surface? Do we need to dig down deeper here? It's about neurodivergent learners, the trust imposing. But is there another question here that's bigger? Again, I'm thinking out loud here. You may have some other thoughts. We might move to collaborative. And we might think, well, who else needs to be in on this thinking? Kate has already said that quite a few people are thinking this way. But who isn't in that room part of the conversation? How could this be explored with others rather than deciding alone? So already those people are talking to Kate, and Kate is a system leader. And so they're starting to explore it with others. Who else could be brought into this conversation? How could this issue be taken elsewhere with further, perhaps, decision makers as part of the conversation? If we're looking at disciplined, we might think about what would it look like to test this thinking safely? So crafting and improving. Okay, so I've got some ideas around this, but I need to test it out. And persistent, what might daring to be different look like in this situation? Okay, so I can see the time is against us as usual in these sessions. So I'm just going to stop sharing a moment. I'm just going to ask anybody if anybody's got any final thoughts on just using a framework like that, which is our language and definition of creativity, to be really using it as a tool for you as creative leaders. Might it be helpful? I know for some of you it's the first time you've seen it, so I absolutely respect that you need time to kind of just immerse yourself in it a little bit. Katie.
Yeah, I was just going to say I've not been before, and it's all been really thought-provoking, and I think it's really nice to just take a step back and looking at the wheel. It makes you challenge yourself to that critical self-reflection. It's something that I think every single person on all of these screens, we've reached this point, you know, in the positions that we're in because we're critical thinkers. But I think it's enabling this team around you as much as it is about, you know, doing it yourself. And I actually think it's I'd really love you to share the prompts that you asked us about the chairs. Because I actually think just to be able to use the opportunity in a senior leadership meeting would actually be really thought-provoking for the rest of the team. I'm quite lucky looking at those chairs. I'd say that my head teacher is very much C. He's a complete critical thinker. He empowers us all to be. I know that that's a massive difference for those of you that have, you know, either a head or even like your deputy who can perhaps be a bit resistant. You know, or the mat above you. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And I think it will be something that I kind of just hold in my head and perhaps even have on my desktop for a while, just so that it becomes a bit more automatic as a way of challenging thought.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, it'll be in the activity today will be in the Padlet, and that is the
Okay.
whole idea of this, that we do not expect you as leaders to be doing all of this. The whole idea with Leading for Creative Thinking, the work that we are as our key mission at the moment is to create leaders, to create further leaders. So to the whole idea of distributed leadership, you know, teacher leaders, plus school leaders, system leaders, and everybody starting to think about their creative leadership using these kind of frameworks and tools. I can see time's really against us, and I appreciate it's your evening. So I'm going to hand over to Lucy and just say thank you very much, everybody. Oh, Lucy, you're on mute.
Thank you, Nia. End of the day. I think every one of these that I've had the privilege to be involved with creates another layer and another stimulus for thinking. Katie, just if you haven't seen any of the others, all of the recordings are up on the CAPH website, so you can access those and the Padlet link. So hopefully, if you're wanting to share it with the rest of your teams, the information is there. But thank you, Nia. I know we've got, I know you're joining the team and Emma at on the 27th as one of the Cornwall Educational Partnership Operation Board streams. So we look forward to seeing you there. And we thank you so much because you're coming to the CAPH conference on the 18th of March as well. So what's great to see is that repetitive opportunity for embedding and learning and growing. So thank you very much for your time, and Sarah and Dee as well. It's always lovely to see you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.